we've made a roughing pass, we'll go through one of the ways to make a finishing pass. In this video, we'll talk about side sweeping with the blade. But before we create our side sweeping finish pass, there's a couple things to think about. One is, can our blade be used for side sweeping? Contact the blade supplier for that information. And the other thing to think about is, what is the status of our profile part after the roughing pass? The roughing pass just roughs out the profile and doesn't necessarily finish it from edge to edge. Our roughing blade cuts typically start on the opposite end of the reference point on our profile. Then blade width and blade spacing make up the roughing pass back to the other end, which doesn't necessarily go all the way to the edge like the finish pass will. The finish pass will go from one end of the profile to the other, completely finishing it. This more than likely would create issues, as shown if we selected bidirectional in our sweeping cut. The easiest way to avoid this would be to cut that edge off first if possible, maybe even before the roughing pass. That would eliminate the interference. Then we could use bidirectional sweeping with the side of our blade. I'm going to turn off our roughing operation, and then this is the easiest way I know of to make our cutout. I'll start by drawing a rectangle with one edge against the geometry line that we've used, and then the other edge the width of my profile. Now I can go to my Park Industries Machine tab and auto toolpath it, after I verify that I have the correct saw blade selected. I've already added a saw blade here using the same parameters that I used when I created the disc. Another thing to think about when using Auto Toolpath is, if Auto Toolpath Undo is selected, it will delete all existing toolpaths, including the roughing pass that we've turned off. If this happens, you can retrieve the cut pass by choosing Undo. And then, as normal, I'll select the rectangle as a geometry to be cut, and then Finish. This gives me 4 cuts to cut the rectangle out. I'll find the one that cuts the edge, and I'll move it up so it becomes the first cut in my program. And then I'll save the other 3 cuts for later after my finish pass. When an existing toolpath turns blue with an asterisk before it, it means that it wants or requires an update. So I'll right-click on it and choose Update. And now my program will first cut the front edge, then it will do the roughing out of my profile, and then the other 3 cutouts will be at the end of the program. Now I'll turn off all my toolpaths and the geometry that my rectangle was on. I'll be using the same geometry line and the existing profile for my finishing pass, which we'll again use cut with disc. Since we just finished using a saw blade, we'll have to reselect our disc again. By clicking OK, double-clicking on the name of the disc, and then clicking anywhere in the drawing to insert it. Now we'll select the strategy of using a vertical disc and cutting with the side. We can leave all the other settings the same because we're cutting the same geometry and the same profile as the roughing pass. And next, we'll choose levels and cuts. I explained the safe Z level in the roughing video. Since this is the same blade, we'll use the same value, 9.25. I'll leave 0 stock to be left on this finishing pass. And the distance to step along curve is how far the blade will move forward in between its side sweeps. I'll try a 1/4 inch. And I am going to use bidirectional since I verified that there's enough clearance. I'm going to leave my max error on the geometry to 0.1 since my geometry is just a straight line. But I will change the max error on the profile to a lesser value to maintain a little more accuracy. We'll want the lead in and lead out to be up and down or vertical. And I won't need a length of the lead in or out because I'm not plunging into material. And the last tab is Tool Data. Here, I'm going to slow the feed rate down to about 1/3 of what I cut at. And as always, verify that flood's on, and then we can click OK to apply the cut. And you may notice that there is no lead or feed in on this side sweeping pass. So I would like to extend it and make it longer by lengthening this line so that the blade lowers into air. I'll do this by going to the Edit tab and choosing Extend by Distance. I'll just extend it by 1 inch. And now we can go and extend the cut path by that amount by right-clicking on and choosing to update that operation. The roughing pass also used the same geometry line. You can choose to update and lengthen that operation as well, but it's not necessary because it uses a feed down into material, whereas the sweeping pass does not. This finishing pass was applied last, therefore it's the last cut in our order of operations. I can either move that operation up or move the operation with the finish pass cutouts down. So my program will first make the cut to cut the front edge off, then it will do the roughing, then it will do the finishing, and then it will make the 3 cuts to cut my part out. I'm going to adjust the order of my cutouts as well. I want my program to first cut off the front edge, and then rough out the profile, and then finish the profile, and then cut the ends of the 2 sides before it cuts the profiled part away from my material. And when you send G-code, you may get this message, cannot join. Just click OK and proceed as normal. Thank you for choosing Park Industries.